Welcome to the Nerd Journey Podcast. Our goal is to help you, the technology professional, accelerate your career progression, increase your job satisfaction, and be more effective in your existing role.
We want to bring listeners like you the career advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers.
I'm John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, sharing co-host duties with Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_.
We're two former IT operations guys who have moved on to pre-sales roles with technology vendors. We have our opinions, but we also like to highlight the journeys of others and see what we can learn from them.
We'd also like to ask for your feedback to make this a conversation, not a one-way broadcast. Email us at nerdjourneypodcast@gmail.com or DM us at nerdjourney on Twitter. So come join us on our nerd journey.
Let's take a trip. Episode 315. Can developing and maintaining good documentation make you a better troubleshooter? It's a question worth pondering, and one that returning guest David Klee brought to our attention. David is the founder of Heraflex Technologies. He's an experienced technology consultant, and he's also someone who developed a love for troubleshooting. From a young age, David began fixing computers while his dad would give music lessons. So who better to talk about troubleshooting than someone who loves it? This week, we'll develop a working definition of troubleshooting and explore what makes a good troubleshooter. As you prepare to listen to this episode, what do you think of when you think about troubleshooting? We'll talk about the importance of documentation and knowing your systems well, and how companies might perceive this as valuable or not valuable. Then we'll talk about how documentation lends itself well to preparing for emergencies, disaster recovery situations, and the development of resilient systems. And then you'll also hear some interesting interview questions and considerations that might help you if you're searching for that next role. Here we go with part one of our discussion with returning guest, David Klee.
David Klee, welcome back to the Nerd Journey Podcast. This has been like one of the fastest turnarounds that we've had.
Thank you. Yeah, it feels like it was just yesterday.
Nick, what is the record? We probably don't keep records like that, do we?
Fastest turnaround was probably between Eric Gross, episode 269 and 294. So that would have been, 25-ish weeks?
This is faster.
It's a little faster, yeah.
I'll take it.
But you actually had an idea, David, because when we start talking to people, we get ideas amongst ourselves, ideas with our guests, and you brought an idea to us. So I'm going to let you kind of give the basis of that, and then we're going to start firing away questions.
Absolutely. So I was looking through a lot of the topics and just kind of thinking about stuff that I see in the industry. And we've been in business 11 years, going back and just kind of what has actually made this work? And it's the art and the science and the luck of troubleshooting. And I really take a good look at just what is out there, what makes some of the best technologists, arguably some of the best troubleshooters in the world. And then how do you apply that to life? And I know it's a weird kind of tangent twist sort of thing, but there's a lot more than just knowing a technical feature or two or being able to Google faster than the person next to you. I have a lot of fun with this topic because this is literally, I'd say 2/3 of every single day is me troubleshooting stuff that other people can't figure out.
Nice. And this is a topic we have some opinions on too, but at least my opinions happen to fall into like patterns and how people learn in areas of expertise. And maybe we could start with your like philosophical background or, how you think about this.
The philosophy is, it's really as much of an art as it is a science. But there's a foundation that has to be there in order to actually be, quote, good at troubleshooting. And I always joke with people, it goes back to when you're a kid. Why does something do what it does? I knew I was up for an uphill journey when I was 5. I figured out how to use a screwdriver. And I took apart the most sacred thing in the house, which was the VCR. And the parent said, you will not get in trouble if you can put it back together and it works. So I did. And I still got in trouble.
and it worked.
And it did work. And it did work. And there were no pieces left over. I distinctly remember that. It's one of those areas where over time, this constant need to know why something is what it is. I see it in some people. I don't see it in all people. And I'm not knocking all kinds of people. It's just one of those little personality traits that you see in some people. But when you look at those that are truly great at an industry, be it IT, whatever, they want to know why. And they don't stop until they know why. And after a while, when you know enough of a direction in this area, be it tech or anything else, there's a piece of psychology called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where essentially you break up what you know or what you don't know into 4 quadrants. Unknown unknowns are the things that get people into trouble because you start making assumptions because you think you know. There are known unknowns, and I consider that enlightenment in IT because now you know more of what you don't know, so you know where the boundaries are. There are known unknowns, there's unknown knowns. It's the unknown knowns are the things that I consider you a master at a technology or a topic of anything, because what you know becomes so integrated into your frame of reference in your being that you don't know that you know it, you just do it. And when you hit that point of a mastery of something, you start to realize, yeah, I can do a lot more of this stuff. I can adapt, I can learn quick. You may not be able to explain how you do it, or you may not be able to tell somebody the steps to do it, but it's just muscle memory. It's just go, you do, and it works.
Could you also call that the expert's curse? Like you don't remember what it was like to be a beginner?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The truly good educators are the ones that can actually take what they know and dial it to the level of the people that they're talking to. Some experts cannot do that, but they are so good at what they do. Others can. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's kind of the idea that you can have mastery of a skill or process, but not have mastery of teaching that skill or process or explaining that skill or process, right? So, doing and teaching are 2 different skills. And
yes,
they can overlap. They do overlap, but they don't always overlap.
Yep. I come from a family of teachers, believe it or not. My parents were traveling road musicians for a long time, and they went down the rabbit hole of education, but they've always done their own thing on the side with music and recording studios and video production. It's fun. I pick up on the technology side of that. It's neat to be able to explain to somebody how something works and why. I love it.
I always thought of the Dunning-Kruger effect as the people who know a little bit who think that they know a lot.
That's one of the 4 quartiles, yeah.
It's the assumption that you know more than you actually do. And then the more that you actually learn, the more you realize that is out there that you don't know.
The first quartile is what you're referring to there, but the whole thing is this quadrant breakdown of knowledge and mastery of something. It's fun. It's the unknown unknowns that gets people into trouble. It's the unknown knowns that really separates people.
When I think about troubleshooting, I usually think about trying to fix a problem. Maybe it's a high priority, maybe it's a lower priority, but it's trying to figure out, as you said, why is this thing not doing what it's supposed to do?
I like that. That's exactly it. Why is it doing an unexpected outcome? And then what do you need to do to get it to be the expected outcome? Could be small, could be big.
Is that the beginnings of a definition of troubleshooting? Is there a more formalized one?
I think the definition of troubleshooting is essentially pounding on it until it works again. There's so many possible definitions of this. I figure it's a formal methodology or informal methodology for understanding why something does not have an expected outcome and working through the process that is an iterative process, either elimination or identification. And you end up with essentially identification, review, remediate, rinse, and repeat until you get the desired outcome. That's about as formal of a definition as I can give you.
I never really thought about breaking it down that way, but it does make sense. And it, I think, maybe belies the art of it, where you maybe from experience know which things are more likely than others.
And it's the process as well. A lot of people will go in, if something's not working right, they'll go in and change 10 things and then test again. If it starts working, which of those 10 things actually fixed it? Was it one? Was it a combination of 3 of them? You don't know, but you'll never know because you're not going to go undo it because it's working now.
Yes, so true. I'm going back and thinking The things that I'm good at troubleshooting are the things where I've lost fear of the thing going wrong. So like I'm fairly decent at troubleshooting computer systems or, software systems, especially when the stakes are low. Like I'm pretty bad at troubleshooting like car things because my knowledge of that domain is extremely limited and it feels to me like the stakes are really high, whereas maybe someone who has a lot of expertise, them saying like, tighten this by like a quarter turn, like the stakes are low to them, right?
Well, it depends on what you're troubleshooting. If you're troubleshooting a squeak from a headliner, the stakes are low. If you're troubleshooting, I hit the button to start the car and it doesn't start, or I hit the button to start the car and it exploded, the stakes are a little higher at that point. See, the symptoms going into it. And I think to me, that's part of that risk qualification. Just like I was working on something today, actually. Payment processing system, great people involved, but they didn't know what they didn't know. The act of troubleshooting with changing something and testing it, we ran the risk of actually failing to process payments for a very large company. And because the process that had been established was retrieve the data, process the data, delete the data. How do you test that? Especially if you're walking into it and you don't know. So the risk was extremely high. So we stopped mid-troubleshooting session and said, we need to get the folks on board who built this. We need their input on it because we had no documentation on it, of course. And then what do we need to do to troubleshoot this safely?
I think you just outlined a prerequisite for troubleshooting, which is knowledge of the systems. At least some, the more the better.
Yeah.
How does that actually play into the process? Like, what's a correlation between how good I can be of a troubleshooter and how well I know my systems?
That's a great question, because if you know your systems really well, you're more efficient at troubleshooting because you know what's possible and what isn't possible within a given set of constraints. If it's a database setting, you know the ramifications of on or off, or sometimes you can turn the knob up to 11 if you really need to. You know what's going to happen because you know the platform and you know your environment and you know how they come together. If you know this stuff, you can resolve these issues a whole lot quicker. You know all the systems interacting with the one that you're troubleshooting. You know the impact of the outage. And if you can troubleshoot yours in a way where you know who to call, you know what to ask for. Hey, I think I fixed this. Check that, check that, check that, check that. If everything checks out, we're good, we're resolved, incident over. Those are big. The hardest parts are when you're inheriting a system and somebody else built it and you have no documentation on how it actually comes together or what's talking to it or why certain things are the way they are or the certain hacks that everybody's got in all these systems. You don't know why they were put in there. Was it somebody was lazy and couldn't troubleshoot something? Or was it a legitimate thing and it's needed? If you take that off of there, problem reappears that you didn't know was there because somebody band-aided the thing. It's tough. From a business perspective, the whole, we've always done it this way and it's always just worked. Well, you can reach around your body to scratch your belly. But is that the most efficient way? Sometimes, maybe. If you got 9-foot long arms, maybe it's the most efficient. I don't know. But most of the time, it doesn't work the best that way.
It's an interesting rethinking of domain knowledge, right? It's a very specific type of domain knowledge, and it's this specific system and its specific failure modes and what has gone on in the past to diagnose and fix those things. And a resilient system will have those things documented, right?
Documentation's critical on this stuff because in my world, the flip side of this is, what if you're coming in from the outside? And what if you've never seen this machine before, ever? And you were asked to troubleshoot something that people with all of that domain knowledge cannot figure out. That's my normal day. That's hard. That's really hard. Keeps you on your toes. Honestly, it's a lot of fun. It's kind of the nerd version of an adrenaline rush when you figure this stuff out. But there are some days at the end of the day, your brain is just tapioca at the end of it. Because it's what has already been done, what should have been done, what questions you have to ask to pry some of this domain knowledge out of their brains, because they probably don't have it documented. How well do you know the platform without knowing the implementation in order to extract what's the actual state of it is versus what they're telling you. Because perception of a system state might be entirely different than the reality of the system state. That's a hard art to master right there.
Sometimes I would say that somebody who doesn't know a system would have maybe a better chance of doing the diagnosis because, like the person who knows a system is going to make an assumption. And the person who doesn't know a system is going to say, why do you think that? Oh, the database is running great. Why do you think the database is running great? The system isn't working. Why do you think the database, which is underlying this, is great? Oh, because we look at this number. Is that one number the entirety of database health or whatever?
Yeah, it's quantify it. And when you come into it without having spent a lot of time digging in, you're right. You don't have the preconceived notion. Because I walk into some environments and everybody's like, it's got to be the network. Show me the data telling me it's the network.
It's always the network.
It's always the network. The network hates security. Security hates app dev. App dev hates the DBAs. Infrastructure hates everybody. Give me the raw data. And I think that's the hardest thing. It's because with the preconceived notions comes subjective, quote, air quote, explanations that may or may not be founded in reality, but it goes back to belief rather than quantifiable objective data. We think this is the problem, therefore it is the problem. Show me the data. Show me why you think this. And most of the time, people cannot produce that data.
In their defense, sometimes it is statistically plausible, when they say, like, maybe it's not this specific system, but the last 8 times they ran into a problem, it was a network problem. So they think to themselves, it's 80% chance that it's a network problem.
But they have the data to back up the assumption.
Right.
The last 8 times, this has been the root cause. Therefore, this is where we're starting. I'm fine with that.
Right.
I'm totally fine with that. But I've been in environments where literally a DBA and a storage engineer were screaming at each other 10 minutes into the first meeting, and the storage guy picked up a chair and threw it. He was so upset. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. They had no data to back up any of it. In the end, they were both right. There was stuff in the middle that was killing it. They were both right. But it's, I'm right, you're wrong. There was no, I understand that my telemetry is showing me this, but your telemetry is showing you something different. Put the data together and then draw the line between them. It's the why is this showing 2 different things? And in that particular example, there was a fabric switch that was misconfigured. There was a jumbo frame setting that was misconfigured. And there was a network adapter that was set to essentially not use more than one CPU in Windows. So the storage layer was showing half of a millisecond latency and was just sitting there twiddling its thumbs. The DBA was seeing high I/O alerts where the SQL Server layer was saying, you've got an I/O that just took more than 15 seconds to complete. And the storage latency was 300 to 500 milliseconds bad. So said Windows Perfmon. They were both right.
It's almost like you are walking around watching a movie and then you're trying to write the script of what's happening.
Yeah. Complete with the cues for the people and the set description and all kinds of stuff.
What level of documentation would be adequate to be helpful in these types of scenarios to sort of diffuse the bomb, between the storage admin and the other person that they were fighting with?
In that scenario, it would have been a diagram of the entire stack. So when you click on a button in an application and it talks to the database, which then talks to Windows, which then talks to storage at the VM, which talk to a LUN on a storage command queue in the hypervisor, which talked to a storage path at the hypervisor, which then hit a fabric switch, which then hit a controller on a SAN, which then hit the storage disk pool and back. If we were able to literally have every single hop there, then you essentially start at both ends and you start collecting the data until you meet in the middle. If you know the pieces involved, you can collect the system state and the telemetry behind it. That's the easy part. You just have to know how to draw that line.
I wonder, does that mean that you should instrument every single hop of those things ahead of time or only when the problem arises?
All of the above. I need it now when everything is running great so I know what to expect. And in the event that the poop has hit the fan, I'm able to instrument each layer again and say, that matches, that matches, that matches. What happened there? Because something changed or something broke or something is acting cranky. if you can do that, it's big. And I probably spend a quarter of my week benchmarking and baselining things for people. I got a whole methodology over here for infrastructure, cloud virtualization, and big databases. How can you tell me it's running slow if we don't know how it was running when everything is fine? You have no objectivity to gauge it's slow.
I like that. I wonder also about representation of this.
That's the hard part.
Yeah, diagramming, because you're talking about like multiple layers of the stack, right?
Yep.
Some of them are physical connections, some of them are virtual connections, some of them are API calls, which encompass, well, this API call says that, it started here and stopped here. And between that, there were 7 things that happened. So, which layer within that API call was it? I mean, there's just a lot there. And then those things can change.
Always. These are constant moving, living, breathing machines. It's an ecosystem. It's not a static stamp, you're done kind of a thing. Even just down to a desktop, you apply a single software update, it can totally change everything about the machine. So to me, it's document what's in your domain. Document it the best you can. Imagine you get hit by the beer truck and somebody else has to come along and follow you. I mean, one, you've been hit by the beer truck. Do you care at that point? Probably not. But if you're doing your job properly, I want you to know everything there is to know about why this machine was set up the way it was, what it took to get this thing running stable, including custom tweaks, the raw architecture behind it, the configuration, everything I can possibly think of, mostly because I'm probably going to be the one to upgrade this thing in 4 or 5 or 6 years. I want to know, what did I do to stabilize this thing? Why is it set up the way it's set up? And if somebody else needs to come along and support this, I literally get phone calls years after I've been in somebody's machine from somebody saying to me, do you remember this? We got a problem right now. Do you remember why that was set up like that? Well, let me send you the documentation that I sent you 2 years ago. Here's all the details you need. Because they've lost the documentation or staff turnover and it was stuck in somebody's inbox, could be anything. But I get that a lot, and I'm picky about my documentation. I know it sounds weird. When I do a full SQL Server and infrastructure health check for people with capacity analytics, licensing, sizing, all the stuff, my average deliverable is 250 pages. Call me strange, but I have a 400-page reference architecture that I maintain here internally, and I'll rip out of there what I need. And that way, you have the why, you have the what. And we've had some real big successes from that. We saved an airline $31 million in SQL Server licensing because we're able to tune this stuff. And because of that, we won a project. Our little tiny 2-person consulting company beat some of the massive, hyperscale engineering firms out there for doing SQL Server migrations for them. They like the documentation. They like the why and not just the what. Pat myself on the back for 2 seconds there.
I often find people think that they don't want to necessarily document for the next person to come along. And I think, as you pointed out, a lot of the times the next person that comes along is like me 6 months from now, not remembering.
Yep.
Because why would you remember any of those things that are, very short-term, very detail-oriented? Those things need to be written down, documented somewhere.
Yeah.
Even better, put into some kind of document or knowledge management system, right?
I document it so I don't have to remember it 6 months or a year from now.
Yeah, because that setting might have taken you, 15 minutes to an hour or more to tweak on that day, whenever it was. And then you don't have to go and mess with it anymore, probably, for a while.
Or that setting may have taken you 40 hours to discover.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There are things all over the place with the kind of tuning that I do. If you didn't know it was there, you'd have no clue. You just have weird symptoms here or there, but these things are so nuanced. And if I'm making a change in something weird, I'm going to document the heck out of it. I'm going to make sure you got 10 copies of it scattered around.
How can we balance thoroughness of our documentation with the need to make sure that we don't stop the work train in the progress?
Oh, it's easy. Caffeine.
That's one way.
The organization has to be on board with this. That's the bottom line. The organization must give that technologist the time to document properly. If they don't, the entire IT organization suffers. that person will be forced to move on to yet another fire, they're going to forget what they just did by tomorrow. They're going to be in the same boat in a month. It's guaranteed. In most organizations, it's go, 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 fix, 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 new, shiny, go, go, go. They don't have the time to do this. And I think that's why I run into a lot of the states that I do out there, where it's something broke, nobody's had the time to think about it or look at it or document or review it. And here, you figure it out.
Is this documenting of the different things we're talking about? Do you normally see that in organizations within a change control system, a wiki, a ticketing system, an asset management system, or just some large document out there, maybe all of those?
The answer is yes. It's literally everything. Metaphorically, it's literally like newsprint and crayons. It's a Word document or a spreadsheet. I don't care. If it's got enough history behind it, I don't care. That's great. Some places they use formal change tracking systems with platforms with, ServiceNow tickets and a whole list of everything that's happened. That's fine. That's the process. It works. Other places, it's, they're treating infrastructure as code and using Jira tickets, for example, to track all this stuff. And that's perfectly fine. As long as I have a list of what has changed and when and why, and a reference document that shows why the system is configured the way it is, any non-standard change, any reason why the system is in use, anything. What's it talking to? What's placed on it? What firewall exclusions? What routes? What everything. If I have that, I know 90% of what I need. It's that last 10% that's always a little squirrely and specific to a given machine. But if I know the why, the what, and the where, you can figure out the how.
So that documentation could be in a system of some kind. It could be in a document of some kind.
Just make sure it's not on a system that if a platform goes down, you're now in a chicken and egg state. I've got some places where quite literally IT has a printer and every month they run a full printout of everything and they throw it in a fireproof safe. Yeah. Try a data center with 2,000 hosts and 50,000 virtual machines that went dark because of a power problem. And the run books for literally everything were on a server.
One of those that are dark, right?
Yeah. It was out there somewhere. Go find it. Yeah. Real world stuff. This stuff happens. Data centers can go down.
So you have to have that documentation offsite.
You need it offsite and or you need it print offsite.
And how many people should have it offsite?
More than one. I always joke about getting hit by the beer truck. We actually saw something similar. We were driving home from the P.O. box one day. We saw a beer truck that had veered off the road and slammed into a local taco joint. Made a huge mess. Nobody got hurt, thankfully. But you can get hit by a beer truck. In the event of a natural disaster, do you think somebody is sifting through the remnants of a home that just got hit by a tornado to look for a binder? No. They're worried about their family. They're worried about their kids. They're worried about where they're going to stay that night. If you have one copy of it, single point of failure. I don't believe in that. 2, 3, 4 copies. Park it on a USB drive at a bank deposit box. Park it in a public cloud provider that key members of IT can get into. The odds that that goes down, slim.
That probably has to be one of those onboarding, offboarding type processes to where, okay, somebody comes on in this specific job role, they get access to these documents, but if they leave the company, then you also have to make sure they can't access that stuff anymore because it's
correct.
It's the run book.
Yeah. Let me give you an example of this. So we helped do DR for a trucking company. It's probably about 8-9 years ago now. They had about 800 VMs. They're in Tornado Alley. Kind of important. And with all the regulatory requirements that the trucking industry is under, these trucks phone home frequently with all the telemetry on fuel economy, where they're going, how long the driver's taking a rest, all that kind of stuff. So if you miss that data point, a driver may be fined at the end of the route for violating certain rules. So we built a DR strategy and the company was totally on board with it. I don't believe in just testing a handful of pieces of DR every once in a while. We fail over and run from DR for 1 week out of every month. Sounds severe. Try this. They fail over the first Friday night of the month. They fail back the second Friday night of the month. And then half of IT gets off the third Friday of the month and the other half gets off the last Friday of the month. I think it's great. They love it. They get everybody in the room that Thursday and say, okay, we're failing over tomorrow. CIO looks around. Okay, you're dead. You're dead. You're dead. You're dead. Room with 30 people. He picks 4 people at random. They cannot be part of the DR failover or fail back. And if somebody has to call them to fail over or fail back the machines that that person is responsible for, they fail. Anybody in the room can fail over the entire company with the run books that are provided and maintained by every member of IT. And in terms of their financial auditors and their insurance company, they don't just say we have DR, they demonstrate it. Their insurance is half of what other trucking companies are because of that.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. And they can fail over the entire company. The last time I checked in on them was 43 minutes. Everything over, including mainframes. Yeah.
Wow.
It's amazing. We put all this together. I mean, it took about a year to get it right because there's a ton of moving parts in there. But you hit go, 45 minutes later, there you are. And it works.
Well, you said something there that I want to dive into a little bit. They got audited for their DR plan or business continuity plan, whichever one we want to call it. We could go into a religious discussion of what the differences between those are, but we'll save that for another time. In terms of what you've seen from auditors specifically, and their asks to see a company's disaster recovery plan or business continuity plan, how much detail does somebody have to have in that? I mean, is it simple as, hey, let me show you our backup console with these jobs and we've been running them for a year?
There's varying degrees of insanity. I mean, audit details there that you go into. Some auditors, they're checking the boxes. I don't like those auditors at all. Those are the ones where, yup, you got backups, check. Oh, it's being copied off-site, check. No. The good auditors are the ones that say, show me how you fail this over. Show me the detailed process. And then, how long did this take? Because that tells you if you actually did it or not. There's some big companies that we work with. When they do, quote, DR testing, they may fail over a system. All the dependencies are back at the source. Hey, it all works. A little bit sluggish, but it works just fine. The good auditors are the ones that ask how long, when, not just what. Those are the auditors that most people in IT hate.
They probably are some of the ones who dig into specific industry type compliances like a PCI or HIPAA or whatever else you want to throw on there, Web Trust.
Yeah. There's one good example of this from an old friend of mine. He was senior DBA manager lead for a big financial company. Auditor came in, show me the process of how you do backups and can you demonstrate this? And then the auditor looked down and in front of him was a technical book, 400 pages, on SQL Server backups and recovery, authored by that guy. So my friend looked at him and handed him a copy of the book and said, okay, now here's the generic how we do this. And here's a different document that explains how we do it here. That answered that in 5 minutes.
Wow.
And yeah, he literally wrote the book on SQL Server backups and recovery.
I'm trying to look at this through a different lens. And it's sparked by something that you said, the employees at that company loved it. I'm wondering whether that is a good screening question for somebody who's interviewing for a job. What is your knowledge management strategy? Like, how do you document how things work and how things fail over and how they fail back? And how is that done? How important is that to the organization?
I love that. That should be something that the employer should have an immediate answer for. So if you're listening and you're interviewing with people, ask that question. If they don't have an immediate answer that doesn't pass the sniff test, run. Because what it means is if the poop hits a fan, you're going to be pulling an 80-hour day to get stuff back up and running.
It's an interesting thing because different parts of the business can document things different ways.
And all of it can be effective.
And maybe different processes have different levels of importance to document. You know, I manage a team, like onboarding a new member of that team. How important is it to document that process to business resilience? Like, it's important, but not critically important. It's not like a P0 level of importance.
We have one company, their DR plan includes how do we help the family of the IT professional that needs to come to us in the event of an emergency. Quite literally, there's an entire plan with corporate housing so that you can pack up your family and go. They've got teachers so you don't lose school. So you're focused on recovery for the company and not worried about your family. These are all the things people don't really think about until you hit some big dollar companies. It's more valuable for the company to literally take care of everything in the event of an emergency. So you're focused.
Now go back to what you were saying, David, because I think you were talking about an interview question that you would ask a prospective job candidate.
Tell me how you document why something works. And when I interview people, and it's a serious interview, I ask them to give me a 5-minute technical presentation on a facet of the thing that they're working on and why they enjoy it. It's an interesting twist because it tells me, can you talk to somebody who knows something about what you're doing? Can you convey it in a way that people can understand? And it helps me get into their brain. Why do you like doing this? Is it because you're a 9-to-5 IT person? Again, nothing wrong with that, but are you in it for the money? Or did you spend last weekend researching something cool that popped up because you enjoy it?
Would you say there'd be a mixed bag on people seeing the value from the employer side of someone having this experience in detailing and documenting systems really well or building a recovery plan for their company? What do you think?
The company should love it. I can't say they always do. If you are too in the weeds with this stuff, some companies might perceive it as you're enjoying the trees in the forest rather than the forest, and you're not able to actually go and chop new trees down. When an employer hears that, they're going to think, well, they spend too much time on paperwork and process. We just need them to get stuff done. And there's a real fine balancing act in there. And if a company is solely focused on getting stuff done, chances are they're not the most efficient. If they're so focused on process and not getting as much done, chances are they're really inefficient. There's an interesting balancing act in there, and I see all kinds. I see Wild West, cowboy type run places, and I see places like insurance companies that you want to make a change to production. It's 20 meetings, 200 hours worth of time to justify it, and then you got to wait 6 months. Both are valid approaches depending on the type of business and what you're trying to do. It gets interesting, and it really goes both ways. If a person's process behind this stuff doesn't line up with the company, you may not be a good fit. And it's good and bad.
It's an interesting point about having systems that are almost seem to be designed to keep change from happening, which is maybe good for things that are very, very important, but maybe that might be really bad when something's gone wrong with something that's really, really important.
Yeah, I'll say I see this a lot. Database technologies are very evolutionary. I see people that can't embrace positive change to be as big of a detriment as people that embrace negative change too haphazardly. I've got an example of this. I've got a company great group of people. They need to get to a more highly available database environment. Sounds reasonable. We set it up. We got them to test it. We did everything. They are too reluctant to pull the trigger and migrate to it. It's too much change for them. Even though databases that they're making tens of millions of dollars a day on are in a single point of failure architecture. Try that kind of change. Nobody there is willing to put their neck out to say, we need to embrace change to improve our situation. And it would solve a lot of stuff, because then you've got all the benefits that come along with the feature. Scale out reporting, all kinds of other good stuff, immediate failover, all kinds of great things that they need. They can't pull the trigger. We've been pushing them for 5 years now. We're at the point where the test platform that we set up for them needs to be upgraded to stay current.
And this isn't as simple as, the value statement's just not there, or it wasn't crafted in the right way. It's more like a perception of priority value from other folks. And to your point, nobody wants to put their job on the line if it doesn't work.
The mandate from the top is more highly available and scale out. And nobody in IT will take that mandate and flip a switch.
That's interesting. That implies that there is a political undercurrent where people don't actually believe that mandate, right?
Well, the mandate's not enforced. And if it's not enforced, is it really a mandate? No, it's a suggestion.
Right. Is it, hey, this is really important to us and we're willing to sacrifice uptime for it?
Correct.
to make it happen.
Yeah. We're willing to sacrifice what we know to move into unknown territory, carefully, cautiously, one piece at a time, and they can't start the process.
That's fascinating. It probably speaks to, like I said, cultural underpinnings or political undercurrents that are not visible from somebody who's outside the system.
Correct. It's a highly politicized environment. I could tell that. But to go back to the last conversation we had on the last podcast, that level of politics at an organization consultants are rarely exposed to. That's part of the reason I love consulting, because I don't do well with politics.
I always thought that the consultants were brought in specifically because of those politics. Oh, you're not going to listen to me. Why don't you listen to a consultant?
We're brought in to be punching bags.
There's that. There's that.
There's a difference. Consultants are brought in for multiple reasons. One is they want you to parrot what they've been saying all along because they think they're right. Some consultants will do that, some won't. Other times you're brought in to tell a company what they need to do, and that's fun. Other times you're brought in because they think they can tell you what to do. You're not an employee of theirs. If they're telling you to do something that is not their correct approach, be it politicizing, be it anything else, you have the ability to say no. I think that's the big reason why I like consulting right there.
If we play the flip side of what we were talking about a second ago, in environments where people won't stick their neck out for improvements or don't see the value of a better documented recovery plan or higher availability, in environments where it is seen as valuable, can me being the one who puts my name on it and is successful with it, maybe I'm just the one who did the documentation, maybe I didn't build the systems, but can that get me a promotion or even save my job?
100% yes. I can give you an example of this. There was a security incident last year at a company. Big one. The DBA, everybody thought he was a pain in the rear. Didn't like him. He was always the guy that said no. He was always the guy that said, no, we need to look at your code before you release it to production. Or you're not going to make a change at Friday at 4 p.m. You're going to do this at noon on a Tuesday so that everybody's around if something goes wrong. And they got hit by a ransomware incident. How long did it take the DBA to recover the machines? 7 hours. How long did it take all of the app servers and the file servers and the domain controller and the web application servers to get up and running?
7 weeks, 7 days.
2 weeks. The database servers were the only ones that stayed up and running because of change, because of group managed service accounts, because of proper management and firewalls, proper service account handling, proper permissions with all this stuff. The machines went into an isolated state and they just stayed up and running just off to the side. Data was up, all because questioned everything, didn't trust a bit. It's like, I trust you and I trust your intentions, but prove it.
Well, when you say intentions, we all have the intention of making sure we keep our resume up to date or our disaster recovery plan for our career or our lives. If you're going to document why a system was set up a certain way or changes to it, think about the level of detail that you would need to have if you were reading this a year from now, 6 months from now, sometime in the distant future where you know you're going to need help recalling some of the details of what was done before. I think that's really important. You can take that do unto others mentality. I want to do this so that other people can fix this. So they'll have all the information so they won't have to bother me because I made the last change or I set this up. But also, I could be one of the people who needs to fix this next time. I want to do it for myself. I think having the documentation can make it easier for a specific team of people to rotate and take vacations without getting calls. If everybody knows where the documentation is, knows that it's thorough enough to actually be helpful, then hopefully That makes your vacation time actually vacation time and not just, oh, I got a couple of calls on vacation and it was kind of like I was working anyway. Maybe your company or your team isn't doing this, but you could start the trend. You could even operationalize and help your team do it as a way to build up the rest of the team members and really progress to that team lead role. So if this is not happening within your team or organization, you might need to talk to your manager or existing team lead about the value of better documentation or doing it a little bit differently than it's been done before. One would hope that even if it's just for the team you work on, that there are ways to make small improvements, even if you're not to the level of depth that you think needs to happen. Something better than what you have is still something. There were some pretty good questions that we could ask in interviews about how companies do documentations and manage change. There might be some other questions that you could glean from the discussion we had with Abby Clobridge in episode 293. That's a great episode to go back and listen to on the heels of listening to this one. I really liked what David said in that troubleshooting is about drawing that line between point A and point B and checking the telemetry at every point in between. But for us, when we're in a troubleshooting situation, it's usually because something's broken. We need to fix it. It could be high pressure, low pressure, medium pressure, depends on the severity of the situation. When you're troubleshooting with other team members, this is an opportunity to have some empathy. Like David said, it's not about you're right, everybody else is wrong. It's about here's the data I have. What data do you have? Let's work together to figure this out. But just remember that we can learn a lot from the people who are helping us troubleshoot a problem, the way they ask questions, how they interpret the data or the telemetry they're looking at from whatever system they maintain compared to the telemetry that you specifically might have. And maybe you can learn a little bit about how they document the changes that they make and see how it compares to how you're doing it or your team's doing it. Toward the end of that discussion, we talked about how documentation lends itself quite well to making sure we're prepared for a technology emergency, a business emergency that might require solving a technical problem, fixing an outage situation. Next week, be sure to tune in because we're going to talk about emergency preparedness for your career and how documentation can help you there. I hope you enjoyed this discussion with David. We'll see you next week.
Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White at BJourneyman, for Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.